This week, Mixtape dropped, and it dropped to critical acclaim. This is a game that was given 10s by many outlets. Going over to IGN's review by Simon Cardy, they say, true nostalgia isn't the replication of a specific time or place, but of a feeling. It's those flashes of emotions that transport us back into memories that have long sat dormant. I was born too late to be a teenager in the 90s. I grew up thousands of miles away from the schools of Northern California. I barely stepped onto a skateboard outside of a couple of scraped knees in the summer of 2003, but none of that matters, and Mixtape knows it. Australian developer Beethoven and Dinosaur fills each and every moment of its coming-of-age tale with incredible music perfectly handpicked to set the tone for its free-flowing chapters in a way only nostalgia can. As original as it is reverential, it's a masterfully constructed dose of new memories hinged brilliantly on how they remind us of our own. The coming-of-age story is perhaps my favorite framework in all of fiction, that longing for a time I didn't live in and being given a chance to hang out with friends who never knew me are sensations I find myself coming back to often. This is far from the first video game to tackle the concept, of course, but it might be the first one to have nailed a tonal balance that hits just right for me. I've tried to enjoy the Life is Strange series more than once, but it's always leaned into the corny territory, just a little too much for my taste. Mixtape, on the other hand, feels more rooted in how actual people talk and is all the better for it. Sweet without being saccharine, thoughtful but never forced, and always funny. Ultimately, they would give this game a 10, rating it a masterpiece, saying a musical delight from start to finish. Mixtape sets a new standard for coming-of-age stories in video games and does so with a masterful sense of style. Other reviewers who I very much respect, Kind of Funny, Greg Miller, and Tim over there, giving it a 10 as well, but there was a moment where Blessing, another reviewer I very much respect, someone who I think is an up-and-coming star of the video games journalism space, mentioned that while this game was good, it wasn't a masterpiece to him because it's not necessarily relatable to his lived experiences.
You start this game up, and immediately I'm just infatuated with it. Pretty soon you won't be listening to music. You'll be listening to who you were. And that, I just got chills saying it. You set in, and that is the thesis statement of this video game. I can't say it's anything but a masterpiece. This, to me, is a 10 out of 10 on the Kind of Funny scale.
This is a 10 out of 10. This is a masterpiece. This is a game that I don't know if there's ever been a game I've played that I'm like, I could recommend this to anybody.
There is a level of something there in the subject matter that weirdly isn't for me. Like, I'm not connecting with it on as deep of a level as you guys, and it might be era, it might be age, it might be like I did not grow up as a white kid in the 90s, right? Yeah. That said, I still think it's a very special game that I recommend to anybody.
I thought that was particularly interesting and a very good point. This game seemingly is trying to encapsulate an era that is well portrayed through like early 2000s, basically Northern California movies, stuff like American Pie and the likes, stuff that was very much of a time and place. And a lot of these reviewers, are like myself, white guys who were born in the 90s or born in the 80s, lived through the 90s or the 2000s, which was, a transitional time to where we're at now, and lived in the suburbs, which, this makes it so that this game is very relatable to our lived experiences. But it does kind of bring up like a question: can games journalists ever be truly objective? I think no. I think that it's difficult to have these sites be like, this is IGN's review rather than Simon Cardy's review, where it should be, this is Simon Cardy's review on IGN. This is Greg Miller's review on Kind of Funny. Because with a medium like video games, things are going to be very much through the lens of people's own lived experiences. And if they relate more to something, they're going to obviously enjoy it more and give it a perfect rating. So then anybody who sees this is like, wow, this must be a perfect game. And then they play it and maybe they're like, it's fine, but I don't have the nostalgia that makes it a masterpiece, like other people have said. Another reviewer who I very much respect, Gene Park of the Washington Post, he has been kind of going through this on Twitter and then in his own review, and it says, it's like living a John Hughes movie, and it shows the limits of nostalgia. If you ever wanted an interactive John Hughes movie, Mixtape arrived this week as the perfect answer. Developed by the small Melbourne-based team Beethoven and Dinosaur, Mixtape is a $20 3-hour interactive experience that repackages classic Hughes coming-of-age beats into short bursts of minigames and visual storytelling. Released on PC, Xbox, PS5, and Nintendo Switch 2, it leans hard into the late 80s and 90s nostalgia, following 17-year-old Stacey Rockford on her last day in 1999 before leaving for a New York university. She's obsessed with music, a walking encyclopedia of trivia spanning post-punk to Roxy music. We all know someone like that. I used to be someone like that. That's roughly where my connection to this era ends, which is strange considering I graduated the same year as Stacey, but I grew up in Guam, in a majority brown community, and the John Hughes universe was alien to me. Nobody I knew lived in those houses, so those house parties didn't exist. Underage drinking enforcement was lax, and I became a barfly by 15. When Stacey and her friends, Cassandra and Slater, set out to score alcohol for the big beach party, the game gilds the whiskey bottles in gold as if they'd unearthed the grail. Almost everyone in this game is white, and we didn't listen to Portishead, we listened to Bob Marley and Tupac. We did a lot of drugs, more than just grass. This isn't to say Mixtape doesn't land. It's a mediation on the transience of life, on cherishing every moment and every connection. The writing explicitly asks us to leave nothing unsaid, a simple reminder, but a vital one. When the game offered me that I thought of a high school friend, a boy I grew up with and loved dearly. We drifted apart in our early 20s, and he died before I told him how much he meant to me. Mixtape views all those through a very specific, white suburban lens, but it deals in enough generalities to summon your own reflection back at you. This video game is, at its best, a video game. Though I never related to the used films, Ferris Bueller's Day Off is an epochal classic for many reasons. Including its grand action-packed finale, the movie always moved like a video game, and Mixtape seizes that interpretation to brilliant effects. Of course, sprinting across strangers' backyards feels like a Mario level. So, I think, Gene is very fair to it. He's saying, hey, this is a game that's going to appeal to a lot of people who've had these types of experiences in their life. It doesn't appeal to me in that same way. So he's more perhaps objective about what the game is offering. And it seems like there's not tons of actual offerings in the way of gameplay. So I just think that this is an important thing to note with games like this, that if you have this type of lived experience, you're probably going to really enjoy it. But it's also important for critics like Blessing, like Gene Park, to share like, hey, I like this game. It doesn't have the nostalgia that really seems to strengthen it in the eyes of other reviewers. I think that's kind of a cool moment in video games. It's not something to be upset about. If you love Mixtape, this isn't an indictment against it. This is more just like an interesting moment in video games where a video game is so heavily influenced by experiences that a lot of the video games journalists did have, being probably at this point late 30s, early 40s, versus some other video game journalists or modern, or I mean, Gene is of course a veteran, but grew up in Guam, as he said, who didn't have these experiences and can look at it more objectively. So I just thought this was a very interesting conversation. I am looking to do my own review of Mixtape, but be warned, I am a white guy who grew up in the 2000s and lived in the suburbs, so the underage drinking, trying to get booze for a house party, very relatable to me. So I probably will very much enjoy it. Also, I am hosting a podcast where we're probably going to discuss it called Wicked Good Show over on the Better Radio channel this week. So go check that out. My co-host Dylan and I are going to be talking about our experiences with this game. You don't want to miss it. Also, check out our other channels, which include Those Fake Nerds for nerd and pop culture news, Where You Get Sports for sports news, and Better Radio for all of our podcasts. Again, really appreciate you checking this one out. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next one.